Welcome to the first virtual Minnesota CF Center Education Day. For years, we've done this in person, but being the dead of winter, we figured we'd give a shot at virtual. So I want to thank everyone for joining us on this freezing Tuesday evening. You now get to see where I live. Well, it's my office, but I seem to live here. So I get to start us off. Every year at the Education Day, we do a kind of center update and registry report. My co-director, Sam Goldfarb, our pediatric program director, has a family commitment, so he has left it up to me. So I'm going to share my screen here with some slides. And I'm hoping everyone can see the title slide. Yes? Somebody shake their head. Yes. All right.
Yes.
So, this is the Minnesota CF Center Education Day update and registry report. And I want to start with a thank you. Thank you to all of the patients and family members, people with CF who have taken some time to join us. So first, I want to thank all of you, not just for joining us, but for all of the work you do and taking care of yourselves and taking care of each other. I know it's really a full-time job, and I really admire all of the effort everyone puts in to maintain their health and to remain educated about CF, which hopefully only serves to improve your health and your peace of mind. I want to thank the pediatric and adult care teams, and I'm not going to go through everyone because it would take a long time, but we really think of this as entirely a team sport. Each of the disciplines adds an important component to your care, and really appreciate it. And that's what really, frankly, makes this job so much fun is the opportunity to interact with you and then and be part of such a talented team. And I want to thank the CF Foundation first. Directly, they are helping to host this meeting and figure out how to do this virtual thing. And also sort of the CF Foundation at large, who's been responsible for so many of the advances that have been so life-changing for you and frankly, so career-changing for me. So thanks to the foundation, they just do an amazing job. And some of the registry report that we're going to look at is actually driven by the foundation, the information that the foundation actually provides to the center. So thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit about the registry report. Every year, each CF program, each CF center gets sort of a report card. There's one report card for the pediatric program and one for the adult program. And it tells us sort of how are things going? How is the care that we're providing? The foundation provides it to us each year in the spring. We haven't gotten the current one yet, so it's always sort of a year old. So the last one we got was in the spring of 24, describing how things were in 23. So some of this data is a little bit old and some of these things have changed. The report is sort of the same format every year. And I'll kind of review the format, but they compare us to how do we do compared to all the rest of the programs in the country, and how do we do compared to ourselves in the past 10 years. So we'll look at a few of those graphs together. Interestingly, this is driven by PortCF, which is this huge database that the foundation maintains and has maintained for years and years. And actually, Dr. Warwick from our center started the database, on graph paper back in the 60s. The foundation took it over either in the 60s or 70s and have sort of advanced, over the year to now clearly a computerized system. It's been the basis of dozens and probably, to be honest, hundreds of scientific articles. It's really helped us move the ball, this huge nationwide database. It supports research studies, new interventions. Whenever the foundation is planning a new study, part of what they use in planning is the data from the database. It monitors health trends in CF. So what are the treatments that the centers are using? What are the ones that seem to be advancing care, and what are the ones that maybe aren't? It supports quality improvement work. Each center gets a report saying, how are you doing? sort of, first thing you want to look at is where you're doing well, but you really want to look at where are the opportunities to improve the care that we're providing. So the registry report really helps us in deciding our quality improvement work. Now, there is going to be a new platform. They've been using the current platform for, I think, like 20 years, but with all of the sort of advances in computer technology, they're moving to a new platform. Now, this is a huge decision. It's going to be an enormous amount of work to move all of the data to the new platform and then start entering new data in the new platform. Right now, all of the data entry is actually manual. A couple of our folks, Denise and Alyssa, actually enter all of the data. It's going to move to an electronic data entry, which is going to be a lot more efficient and potentially more accurate. It's going to allow much more sophisticated data analysis, but because they're moving to a new platform, we're actually going to have to reconsent all of the patients. Now, we're currently caring for over, I don't know, 550, close to 600 patients. So this is going to be an enormous job and not something we need to do for a year or two, but down the road, you probably are going to hear about us needing to reconsent everyone because they're moving to a new platform. Regulatory requirements demand that everyone is reconsented. So we're going to start to look at some of the report, some of the data from our registry report, which is driven by this Port CF. So the first couple of things we're going to show is really kind of an overview of how the pediatric and adult programs have been doing over the past decade. So this is just glancing at it, it's hard to tell what this is, but what we're seeing is the FEV1 is along the y-axis and the BMI are sort of the nutritional parameters along the x-axis. And the pink dots are 2013, the blue dots are 2023. Each dot represents one of the programs in the country. This red dot is us back in 2013 on the pediatric side and us in 2023. And what you can see is that it has moved up, which means better lung function, and over, which means better nutrition. And if you want to look more specifically, back in 2013, the average BMI for kids was 100.5 at our program, 100.5%. And the average for the country was 94. So we were, about 6% better than the rest of the country. The BMI for us was 55.9. For the rest of the country was 51.7. That's actually a BMI percent for kids. But now in 2023, we've moved up to 108.7%. So we moved from 100 to 108%. The rest of the country moved from about 94 to 103. And the weight has increased as well. So what you can see is that over the past decade, both lung function, average lung function, and average nutrition has improved for the kids. Similarly for the adults, we were down here, we're up to here. So what you can see is that 2013, our average for adults 20 to 40 was 78%, while the rest of the country was 69%. And we've moved from 78%, the BMI went from was 22, with the rest of the country 22.1. And we've moved from 78 up to 92. So in 10 years, we've moved more than 10% up. The rest of the country has moved up as well. They're at 86, and the nutrition has improved as well. So what this tells us is that, we are making, the entire country is making great progress, but we are progressing as well. And actually, the further to the right and the higher up you are, the better things are. So you can see that the Minnesota Center is one of the highest and furthest to the right. So we are continuing to lead the pack in our nutrition and lung function. So now I'm going to show you a little bit of breakdown of a few more specific measures that we get from the foundation. So looking at pediatrics, this is the pediatric lung function. So for each measure, they give us two charts. This chart, each of these blue lines represents one of the programs in the country, and the red line is us. The further, depending on what the measure is, either the further to the left or the further to the right you are, the better things are. So this is the FEV1 for kids 6 to 12 and for 13 to 17. And what you can see is we are way over to the left. So we are among the best programs in the country. And what down here is where we are for the past 10 years. So the green line is the average for the rest of the country. The red line is us. And so what you can see is we are above average. We're above the average and gradually increasing both for the younger kids and the older kids. Now, we don't have anything below 6 because, as many of you know, kids less than 6 years old really aren't able to do PFTs. Sticking with the pediatric, so you can see is that the average is around 106, 108%. So actually above normal for both younger and older kids. These charts are showing what portion of the patients are seen, what portion of the kids are seen by each of the 4 disciplines: the respiratory therapist, the dietitian, the social worker, and the pharmacist. And if we concentrate on the lines down here, you can see that we are close to 100% for all of the disciplines, except pharmacy. And even pharmacy, we're very close to 100% and well above the national average. So on the pediatric side, all of the kids are being seen by all of the disciplines, and we really think this is important. Each of the disciplines really adds a really important component to your care, and a really important assessment and an important education. So it's really important to us that each person with CF is seen by all of the disciplines at least once a year, and more often if needed. This is modulator therapy. Now, many of us have experienced, what a benefit the modulators have had. And this is a chart showing what portion of our patients that are able to take modulators are on modulators, and around 91.4%. So the vast majority of our patients that can take a modulator are on them. Now, some portion of the patients are eligible, so they have the right genotype, but either didn't tolerate it or chose not to take it. So, pretty similar to the national average, in the low 90s. Moving on to the adults, this is the lung function for adults. Now, as people grow, they lose lung function. We have some people that are, we have people in their 50s, 60s, 70s who have had CF for decades, and so that is going to impact the average lung function. But what you can see is that we're well to the left, with an average FEV1 of 86%. And again, the red line above the green line, meaning that we are above the national average. This is our influenza vaccination. We really feel like the flu vaccine is really important. As much as people kind of shrug the flu at some point, it's actually a really serious disease. And while, it used to be before Trikafta, if anyone got any virus, they would sort of end up with an exacerbation. A lot of people now get colds and then just get better and don't get into trouble. But to be honest with the flu, our CF patients and patients in general are still getting quite ill after the flu. So it is really important, even though we're tolerating a lot of the viruses fairly well, CF patients still get quite sick with the flu. And so it is important that we get all of our patients vaccinated. This is similar data, the modulator therapy. This is modulators in adults, and again, 91.6% of our patients are on modulators. And actually, every so often, and about 2 weeks ago, we reviewed all of our patients who are not on modulators, and anyone who's not on modulators and on the adult side, and it's probably same is true on the pediatric side. It's just that as the adult doc, I haven't reviewed that data. But all of the patients on the adult side who are not on modulators either didn't tolerate them or chose not to be on them. So anyone who could be on a modulator is actually on a modulator. So we think that's really important to make sure that everyone is getting the best care that we can provide. This is a little bit in the weeds, but something that the adult team is proud of. This is checking a mycobacterial culture. So this is a special culture. Mycobacteria tend to make CF patients sick. And what we found was back here that our rate of mycobacterial cultures was way lower than we wanted to be. So we've got a quality improvement group, and our quality improvement group said, look, we're going to attack this. We want to get from 20% up to at least 50%. Our goal was 50%, but we got up to 60%. And this is at 2023, and my expectation is still rising, so that our quality improvement group has put their efforts into fixing this, and we've made real good progress here. So anyway, this is, the area where we've made progress with a dedicated quality improvement effort. An area that I want to mention, both on the pediatric and adult side. So we are seeing, this is how many patients came for at least one visit. So one visit with one culture, one PFT, and 98% of our kids had at least one visit. The goal, at least historically, has been 4 visits, and this, remember, is data from 2023. And unfortunately, only 40% of our patients, 40% of our kids got to that 4 visit mark. If we look at the adults, again, 98% of our patients had one visit, but actually only 22% of our patients in 2023 got to that 4 visit mark. So this is an area both peds and adult would really like to work on. This is something we need to work on internally from an access standpoint, but you can help us by, at the end of your visit, try to make that clinic appointment. So, if you wait a couple of months, then, oh gosh, the clinic is full. So when you leave clinic, try to get that appointment either on the way out or really soon after, so we can get, in order for us to help you, to know you, to provide the care that we want to. It's really important that we see you periodically. And so try to help us help you by trying to get those visits scheduled. There are a couple of QI efforts. So the pediatric team, they were a little concerned about their flu vaccine. I had shown you the adult vaccine rate. The pediatric vaccine rate has fallen off some. The flu still makes people really sick, and so the pediatric team is going to focus their quality improvement efforts on bringing that red line back closer to that 90 or 100% mark. The flu you can lose serious lung function following an influenza infection, even with the modulators. So we really would like the pediatric team is really focused on improving that. The adult team, one of the things we'd like to work on is most of our patients are seen by most of the disciplines, but we'd really like to push that up a little bit higher. These red lines aren't quite where we want them. So we're going to work on access and scheduling. And this was actually the focus of one of our QI efforts, and that some of you, hopefully most of you, are now receiving a letter before your visit telling you who you're going to see. So in the past, it's like, surprise, you're going to see the dietitian, the social worker. Now we're telling you ahead of time, so hopefully you can make time for that. And just in that same vein, we do have an ongoing QI group, both on the pediatric and the adult side. And we have a couple of adult patients on the QI team that help sort of guide our priorities. And so in the next month or so, if you're on the listserv, we're actually looking for another adult to be on the QI team, and actually a handful of adults to be on an advisory team. So you'll probably be getting an email, the adult side anyway, we'll be getting an email or a listserv message looking for folks to participate with us in our QI and our patient advisory committee. So please take a look at that if you're interested. Please send in an application. So that is all I've got, and hopefully I didn't go too far over time. I don't know if there are time for questions, or maybe we'll just leave questions for the end, since I think I am 4 minutes over. So sorry that was rushed, and I always try to put in more than I can in 15 minutes. So next I would like to introduce our Mary Jo McCracken lectureship speaker. So we're honored to host St. Paul author Darla Garvey as this year's Mary Jo McCracken lectureship. Darla is the mother of 2 children with CF. Her memoir, Muddy Thursday, is a tribute to her lost son, Ray, and the strength, grace, and humor of her daughter, Martha. She's also the co-owner and developer of Sunny Ray's Neb Cup holders, and a seasoned public speaker in CF awareness and advocacy. We're thrilled she's here to share her experience with CF. So welcome, Darla, and thank you for being here. I'm going to, oh, good. I think somebody already stopped sharing my screen.
Well, thank you so much for that nice introduction. I appreciate that. And I'm glad to be here to be part of CF Education Day. And I'm especially pleased that I have the opportunity to acknowledge the late, great Mary Jo McCracken. And for those of you who didn't know her, Mary Jo was an amazing pediatric nurse practitioner who had a special way with young children and adolescents. And she was a wealth of knowledge and a huge support to CF families as well. And somehow she always managed to make CF clinic appointments fun for my son Ray and my daughter Martha. And I will always be indebted to Mary Jo McCracken for how she handled a very difficult situation that my son was going through. And I'll get to that in a second, but I want to first preface that my son was quite the athlete. Over the years, he participated in so many sports, uh, soccer, baseball, basketball, football, hockey. He was a wrestler, a swimmer, a skier, and a golfer. And he earned a black belt in karate when he was just 10 years old. And when he was 10 years old, he pretty much fell off the growth chart. No matter how much he ate, no matter how many weight gain shakes he drank, he just couldn't maintain his weight. And if he did happen to gain a couple pounds, as soon as he got sick, those hard fought pounds would melt away. So sports was a wonderful thing. We loved watching him play sports. But it was kind of a catch-22, really good for his lungs, but all that activity burned off calories, and he really struggled with the weight, and inevitably a feeding tube was necessary to supplement his calories. I know some people refer to CF as a invisible disease, and other than Ray's small stature from the outside, you couldn't tell that he had CF. Nobody was the wiser, but Ray was a summertime, barefoot, shirtless, outdoor kind of kid, and a feeding tube would be visible. And he had a really hard time coming to terms with that. A few weeks after surgery, Ray had a follow-up appointment, and Mary Jo was in clinic that day, and he had already gained a couple pounds, and she congratulated him on that, and then kind of went into a pep talk that he would continue to gain weight and he would get stronger, and over time the feeding tube would just become normal and he wouldn't even think about it. Unconvinced, Ray looked Mary Jo in the eye and said, "Yeah, well, you don't know what this is like." And Mary Jo said, "Actually, Ray, I know exactly what this is like." And then she proceeded to lift her shirt up just enough to expose that she had a feeding tube. And I remember Ray going, "How come you never told me that you had CF?" And Mary Jo said, "Well, I don't. I have a different illness, but it is one that also requires some assistance for her nutrition via a G tube." And on our drive home, uh, Ray said, "Well, I guess if Mary Jo can do it, then I can do it too." And I can't thank her enough for how she normalized that. And he did make quite a transformation over the next year. He gained 30 pounds and he did feel stronger and healthier. I know they say it takes a village to raise a child. For CF families, that village includes the expertise of caregivers like Mary Jo. And we've been very fortunate to have had a strong CF team from the best pulmonologists, surgeons, nurse practitioners, respiratory therapists, endocrinologists, IV nurses, nutritionists, and social workers. And they have all educated us and helped guide us through some important decision making. And that decision making has been going on for over 3 decades. But I guess I'll take you back to the beginning of my CF story. I have a very large extended family, and my mom is one of 11 children. I have 48 cousins on my side, yet CF had not presented itself to my side of the family nor my husband's side. So when our son was diagnosed in 1990 at the age of 17 months old, collectively between my husband and I, we had exactly 0% knowledge about cystic fibrosis. But very early on, I felt like something was wrong with Ray. He didn't look or act sick. He was very um, content and happy and very alert and engaged in the world around him. But he was also constantly hungry. I was feeding him all the time, and it felt like everything was just going straight through him. We were changing diapers left and right as well. And anytime I expressed concern about this to Ray's pediatrician, he'd kind of play it. He'd say, well, why don't you try giving Ray a different brand of formula? Maybe he'd tolerate it better. Or Ray's teething, and sometimes that causes loose stools. And he'd assure me, well, some kids start out small. He'll grow. He'll be fine. And it's a good thing I'm a rule breaker, because I threw out the guidelines for when you're supposed to introduce food to your child. I just instinctively knew that he needed more, and so I would prepare. I would give him a few spoonfuls of rice cereal with each bottle. Um, but by the time he was 17 months old, we discovered at just a regular clinic visit, a checkup, he had fallen down to the bottom fifth percentile in the growth chart. And it wasn't until then that his pediatrician said, "Okay, I think Ray might have some kind of a malabsorption problem, and I'm going to have him tested for cystic fibrosis." And I said, "Well, what is cystic fibrosis?" And he said, "Well, I'm just going to schedule this sweat test, and we'll rule out the worst, and we'll go from there." And he scribbled something on the top of a form and handed it to me, told me to go up front to his receptionist to schedule this sweat test. And then he just scurried out the door. And I was sitting there with Ray thinking, how bad is CF if it's the worst? And what in the world is a sweat test? I mean, I knew absolutely nothing. So I go up front and give the form to his receptionist, and her smiley little expression just changed. And she said, "Do you know what cystic fibrosis is?" And I said, "No, he didn't explain it to me. He just said I needed to schedule this test." And she said, I said, "He wants to rule out the worst." And she goes, "Well, let's hope so, because CF's not good." And I said, "Well, can you just tell me what it is?" And she kind of looked around like to see if anyone was in earshot. And she ended up having me follow her down the hallway, and we ended up in a storage closet. And she was whispering, and I said, just tell me what it is." She says, "Well, it's a genetic illness. It affects the respiratory and the digestive systems. There is no cure. Life expectancy is late teens at best." And then she just led me back to the front desk like that conversation had not taken place. And I scheduled an appointment. And this was 1990, pre-internet. So instead of going straight home, I stopped at our public library, pulled off a medical journal off the shelf, and started reading about CF. And I was reading all about the respiratory effects of CF, and Ray didn't fit the description of any of that. And so I thought, well, good, his pediatrician is off base. He doesn't have this. Then I continued reading about the digestive system, and they might just as well put a picture of my son in that section. Everything added up. And we did have a sweat test done at the clinic. And then his pediatrician said, "It could be a false positive. And I'm going to have you go to the U of M. We'll have it repeat the test." And so we did that, and we tested positive for CF once again. And we were heartbroken. I mean, the more we learned about it, the more overwhelming and devastated we were. Ray was hospitalized so they could do more testing and introduce the respiratory treatments. And we didn't have the airway clearance machine hadn't been available yet. So we were doing respiratory treatments by hand. And it was a process that Ray did not buy into. He fought, and he would try to pull the mask off when we were doing his nebulizers. He would kick and cry and scream through every single treatment. And it was a lot. It was a lot of care. And then about 5 years after Ray was born, in 1993, I was pregnant with my daughter. And at the time, Ray was being followed by Dr. McNamara. And I took Ray to just a checkup, and Dr. McNamara congratulated me. And then I told him I was really excited to have another child, but I was also very worried that my baby would also have CF. And at that time, well, I think it was about a year before Ray was born, they had discovered the CF gene. And so during this time in 1993, when I was pregnant with Martha, there was a lot of talk about gene therapy being the next thing. So there was a lot of excitement and hope in the CF community. And when I expressed concern, Dr. McNamara said, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay because there's a day coming soon when I'm going to be able to tell new parents that the bad news is your child has cystic fibrosis. And the good news is your child has cystic fibrosis. It's just not going to matter. It won't be a fatal disease. It'll be a treatable one. And so there was hope in the community. And shortly after Martha was born, we had her tested, and she too was positive for CF. And I was overwhelmed. We had decided, somebody had to pay the bill. So my husband worked. He was a canine police officer for St. Paul. And I put my teaching career on hold and stayed home with Ray and Martha. And I didn't know how I was going to do it because it already felt like a full-time job taking care of one child. And then to have two with CF and doing it by hand without the airway clearance machine, it was kind of assembly line back-to-back treatments. But the person who made it doable or easier was Ray, the young boy who fought through and protested every treatment, respiratory treatment, became a very compassionate brother and a role model, and became more compliant. So it was easier on me as well. He had a very tight bond with Martha, and he would hold her hand while I was doing the pounding on her. He would remind me, Mom, take your wedding ring off. If you don't cup your hands just right, sometimes I feel the ring against my body, and I don't want you to hurt Martha. And he was just so sweet with her. And even with 5 years between them, as they got older, Ray took Martha everywhere with him. He never sold her out. If his friends came to the door and asked him to play and I was still doing Martha's treatment, he would tell his friends, hey, I'll meet up with you later. I've got to finish something up. And he'd come back and sit with Martha and wait for her. And then he would take her. One example that I just clearly remember is one day, Ray and Martha and Rusty were outside on our front porch, and a few of Ray's buddies called him over and said, hey, you want to play football in their yard? And Martha got ready to go with him, and Rusty kind of pulled her aside and said, we'll find something else for you to do. He didn't want Ray to always be responsible for his little sister, but I don't think Ray ever looked at Martha as a responsibility. And I remember him, Rusty's holding Martha back and Ray's going to head over across the street, and he stops in his tracks and he goes, Dad, just let her come with me. She's really good. We passed the ball to her. And then he took her hand and helped her across the street. And I heard him call out to his buddies, my sister's going to play too. Take it easy on her. And so this bond was just, it was amazing. It was amazing to watch the compassion and the friendship that they developed. And I'll go back to another example. The first night that I hooked Ray up to the feeding tube after he came home from the hospital, he was lying in bed and he lifted up his pajama top, and I was about to hook him up, and he looked at his stomach and he said, I just don't like this thing. I look like an alien. It's just not normal. But if somebody has to have a feeding tube, I'm glad it's me and not Martha. And I have a younger sister, and if I was a young girl and had to get a feeding tube, my first thing would have been, why couldn't she get it instead of me? Ray was a better person than I am. I don't even know if he understood how exceptional he was. And together, Ray and Martha embraced life wholeheartedly. They lived each day with purpose. They didn't want to miss out on anything. And between the respiratory treatments, which were non-negotiable, I was a stickler about that. But every minute in between, well, those were the golden hours. And the Garvey household, our house was the place on the block that every kid knew that they could come over and create just about as much chaos as they wanted. I just had a sense of urgency to make life as fun and pleasurable for my kids. And I didn't care if the whole neighborhood came over, if they covered every square inch of our driveway with sidewalk chalk, if they dragged out the hoses and filled up water balloons and squirt guns. I used to put spray whipped cream on paper plates, and they could have pie fights. It was chaos, but I loved it. And I loved that they were having fun. One thing I didn't like is Ray would build bike jumps and he would dare Martha to lay on the other, like across the bottom of it to see if he could clear his bike over her. I did try to put a stop to that. But they were both the ringleaders of the neighborhood and they loved organizing games. And their favorite tradition in the summer was every Friday night they played flashlight tag. And I can still hear Ray. Flashlight tag began and ended on our front porch. And I can hear Ray holding up his dad's police flashlight. He would make the same announcement every Friday night. This is my dad's police flashlight. Don't break it. Don't drop it. It cost $100. And he had a knack for bringing everyone together. The doorbell never stopped ringing for Ray. But all that was silenced in 2001 on April 12th. We took our son, Ray, Rusty and I took Ray to church where he had his first communion. After church, we met my parents at a restaurant and we had what we could never fathom would be our last dinner with Ray. That night when we got home, we pulled into the driveway and I had asked Ray to run just 3 houses down to go pick up Martha. She had gone to a movie with her friend and the neighbors were watching her. And after a little while, when he didn't come back, and neither one of them came back, I thought I'd better go down and see what's taking them so long. And I remember on my walk thinking, well, Ray's probably inside bragging to the neighbors how he threw back a little wine at communion. And that amusing thought was quickly replaced by sheer terror when I discovered that Ray never even made it to the neighbor's front door. Instead, I found him lying in the middle of their lawn, unresponsive, and efforts to revive Ray were unsuccessful. And we couldn't figure out. I mean, we were absolutely devastated and destroyed, really, and it didn't make any sense. From a CF standpoint, Ray was doing remarkably well, and we just couldn't figure out what happened. And so, on autopsy, we discovered that Ray passed away from a rare cardiomyopathy, which seemed especially cruel, given how hard he worked to stay healthy with CF. And it was also kind of ironic that his heart gave out from an undetected heart condition when Ray was so much the pulse of the neighborhood. That night, we let Martha stay overnight with her neighbor. She didn't know what happened. She just knew that an ambulance came to take her brother to the hospital. And so that night, if only in her sleep, Martha's life would be the same, but come morning, it would change forever. And I began writing, trying to preserve my memories of Ray, and I guess it was because of a mother's fear that I might forget specifics about him. Almost immediately after Ray died, I remember thinking, this is where his story ends, and no one else will ever meet him. And what a shame. Many years would pass before I had the notion that maybe all my little chicken scratch short stories could be compiled into one. Maybe if I told Ray's story, his story didn't have to end if I told it for him. I wrote Muddy Thursday to pay tribute to him, but also to reflect on the courage and strength and resilience of my daughter. The early days and months after she lost her brother, who was her only sibling, that was really rough for Martha. Suddenly, she was the only child in the house. And I think the saddest image I still carry with me to this day is that of her doing her breast treatment by herself. They always did it together. And seeing her alone was, I just remember thinking, this young girl is going to have to get tough. She's in a fight. She's in a fight alone without her sidekick. Gradually, Martha came into her own. She began playing hockey as well, something she also liked. She played from mites all the way up to through high school. She picked up snowboarding. She has a large circle of friends, a wonderful sense of humor. And like her brother, she has a knack for making everyone around her laugh. Martha has celebrated so many wonderful milestones, and she's accomplished a lot in her 31 years. And I can't speak for her, but I imagine she has probably experienced a bit of survivor's guilt, if you will, knowing her brother didn't get to experience the things that she has. Things like learning to drive, going to high school, going on a date, attending college, which was a huge jump for Martha. She attended Colorado Mountain College in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, halfway across the country. And when we expressed concern about her decision to go so far away, I was worried how she would uh, manage CF and be independent and advocate for herself. And she had a good reply. She said, I know I don't have an easy future, but I will have CF and CF related diabetes, whether I live in Minnesota or Colorado. And so off she went. And she has bravely faced every CF challenge and complication without her sidekick. I know Ray would have championed for her. They would have been in the thick of it together. And she's had plenty of reasons to complain, but she doesn't dwell on CF. She doesn't dwell on herself, even though she's missed out on a lot of social events and has been, when she's been sick at home or hospitalized, she's the first to do something special for others when they're going through a rough time. And I think she just knows what a small gesture can mean for someone else. Even her career choices have been in positions of service to others. She was a college instructor and planned all the social engagement activities on campus at MICC, Minnesota Independence College and Community, where she worked with students who had learning differences. Currently, she's working with the CF Foundation as an event specialist. She coordinated this event tonight. And she's very passionate about connecting with the CF community. And I'm not even sure she's aware how exceptional she is either. My son would be 36 years old. And as a mom with two children with CF, we've been at this a long time, over 3 decades, like I mentioned. And we've seen a lot of changes, a lot of hope in development of drugs like Pulmozyme, Toby, hypertonic saline, Kalydeco or Combi, devices that help manage diabetes like the Omnipod and Dexcom have all made Martha's life a little easier. Even so, sometimes CF can still rear its ugly head, and Martha has been hospitalized with lung infections requiring PICC lines at least once a year. Probably repeated hospitalizations started when she was around 12, 13. And by that time Martha was in her mid-20s, her health really began to incline. She was at her lowest weight. Her lung function was ticking down into the low 60 percentile. And the time between hospital stays were getting shorter and shorter. And through it all, she never lost hope. She didn't lose her sense of humor, which is remarkable considering everything she's been through. And in 2019, she started Trikafta, which literally gave her a new lease on life. And she has not taken that for granted. She was very lucky that her gene mutation responded well to the modulator. She gained a fair amount of weight. Her lung function has improved, and she hasn't been hospitalized once since going on Trikafta. And that's cause for celebration. We are absolutely thrilled and grateful that Martha has improved health and she's living her best life. But if I'm being honest, it is a little bittersweet that Ray didn't live long enough to also benefit from Trikafta. And I'm so proud of my daughter. I for her strength, her courage, for never giving up, for the way she conducts herself, for her kindness, her compassion for others. But I think I'm just most proud that she's a decent human being. And I came across a Ernest Hemingway quote recently. Actually, a friend of mine sent it to me on Ray's birthday. And I immediately thought of Martha, but I think this particular quote applies to anyone with CF. So many who have faced challenges in their life and often without complaint. So Hemingway wrote, "The most beautiful people we encounter in life are often those who have walked through fire." And with that, I'd like to end with a message of gratitude and hope. Gratitude for all the healthcare professionals who provide excellent care for their CF patients. Gratitude for the CF Foundation for the hard work that they do raising money for continued research. And I'd like to express my feelings of hope. We have some of the finest doctors and researchers in our corner, and I am confident that we will continue seeing medical advancements that will improve the quality of life for those living with CF and improve the quality of life for everyone. We're not going to leave anyone behind. And while Dr. McNamara told me that there will be a day coming when CF won't be a fatal disease, it will be a treatable one, I'll one up him and say, I think CF will be a curable one. So we're going to hold on to that hope. And I thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Well, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Darla, that was really amazing. Thank you for sharing your story.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm Kathy Mahan. I'm one of the adult CF pulmonologists, and I'm one of the adult co-associate program directors along with Dr. Keel. Daryl, I just want to say I have had the pleasure of meeting Martha, and she is absolutely spectacular. So
Aw.
again, thank you for sharing your story.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We are going to move to our panel next. We have a number of excellent panel members, and I believe we are set up so that our panelist faces will be shown. Is that the case?
Yes. Yep.
Wonderful. How about I just call on each person and allow you to introduce yourselves? The first one that I see is Kate Bayer. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly or not, Kate.
Pretty close. My name's Kate Fire. I am the mom to Ava. She is 13 and a half, and she has been on Trikafta since the summer of 2021. And looking at her today, you'd never know. And this medication has truly done a 180 for her, and she's doing really great. She plays club volleyball, and she's in AP classes in middle school. You never know. So it's just really neat to watch.
Wonderful. We're so thankful that you're here. And I think once we finish introductions, then I'll ask each of you a question. And then at the end, maybe we'll have time for the audience to submit questions as well. Next, I see Nicole.
Hi, I'm Nicole, and I'm one of the adult dietitians. And also there's my counterpart, Tara Griffin. So just shout out to her as well. And I've been with the CF team for about 8 years now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nicole. Next, I see Dean and Jen Gagnon.
Hi, we have Dean and Jen Gagnon. We have a 16-year-old that is a sophomore at Wayzata. He's at his ups and downs, but he is on Trikafta now, and he does have a feeding tube, and we can relate with the whole summer feeding tube issue that we fight with him every time, every day. But overall, he's doing very well. Little small case of pneumonia here about a month ago, but he fought through it very well, and he's doing all right. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next, I see Emily.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Mochio. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and I see adult patients. I work at Riverside over on the West Bank at the U of M Psychiatry Clinic, and I've been with the team now for a little bit over a year, and it's been a fantastic experience, and I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. Thank you, Emily. I see Sarah Keel next.
Hey, I'm Dr. Sarah Keel. I'm one of the prime adult pulmonologists, and I work at the CF Center with Dr. Mahan. I'm one of the co-associate program directors. I did residency here in Minnesota, and then I trained in Pittsburgh with pulmonary lung transplant as well as cystic fibrosis. And so I'm happy to be here tonight.
Excellent, Sarah. Thank you. Next, I see Kelsey Davis.
Okay, I found the audio. Hello, I'm Kelsey Davis. I am a 32-year-old patient. Been at the U since I was tiny baby. And I guess I don't know like what we're supposed to say, but I'll go off what everyone else is saying. I actually was not eligible for Trikafta. My genetic makeup was not eligible for the kind of initial few years, but I went through some trials. I think that's what they're called. And I just started a few months ago. And so we're kind of just keeping track of what my genes do with Trikafta. And we're starting to see some progress. So that's very exciting. And I can jump on the feeding tube train. I actually just had mine put in about 6 months ago for the first time in my life due to some stomach surgeries and things that needed to get kind of just needed a little more, I call it stickiness to myself. So we're on that train and feeling good. So, oh, also, I'm married, almost 11 years married. And we live, well, my husband was in here with my dog, but work full time and yeah, living a good life. So I'm glad to be here.
And Kelsey, we're so excited that you're here with us this evening. All right. I think last but not least, I see MJ.
Hi, I'm Mary Jane, or I go by MJ. I am the pediatric dietitian over on West Main, with working with the cystic fibrosis team, and I've been with the team about 3 years now. So glad to be here.
Okay. I think maybe I'll just put a question out there, maybe with Nicole or MJ. CF care is definitely changing, but nutrition has always been very important. There are definitely some changes and recommendations. Now, what have you seen in regards to how highly effective modulator therapy has changed the recommendations for nutrition? MJ or Nicole, if you'd like to dive into that one.
Yeah, I can jump in. So yeah, CF nutrition care has really come a long way. So I think it's amazing to see all the progress. But then that means like we're seeing a lot of new challenges along with that too. So kind of thinking back to, how it has progressed, for many years, that standard of care was sort of that traditional high fat, high calorie diet. We've really emphasized hitting that target weight to target BMI, trying to optimize nutrition since we knew how closely it correlates with improved lung function and overall health. So as all the patients and families here know, we talked about getting calories in. It didn't matter what the source was, if it was processed foods, fast foods, high calorie shakes, tube feeding, all those things. And now with the use of the highly effective modulators like Trikafta, in addition to the improvements in lung function, we're also seeing some of those improvements in nutrition status. And so with that, we're really seeing more of a shift, at least on the adult side, and MJ can speak to more of the pediatric side, but we're really trying to focus more on aspects of diet and eating patterns to promote long-term health. So now we're not as focused on that, total number of calories that are going in, but more on the quality of the foods that are going in. I think all of us dietitians are really trying to promote balanced eating, overall well-rounded diet. We're definitely not promoting any like drastic weight loss or fad diets or things like that, but we really want to start talking about incorporating foods that are associated with, positive health outcomes in the general population. So things like getting in fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, whole grains, and then from there we can always adapt to meet people's individual requirements from there. So, I think we really just want to point out how highly individualized nutrition care really is now in this era. There's really no one size fits all approach for many reasons. Some people may not be eligible for a modulator, or some people may not have had as a robust response in their weight or nutrition, even with a modulator. So really it's going to be working with your dietitian to kind of figure out what your nutrition goals are and kind of going from there. And, even as your nutrition needs are changing, it's a really big shift and it's a really big change. And we can't ask anyone to make, huge changes when they've been taught to eat a certain way for, 10, 20 years. So again, it's something that's going to take time.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree with everything Nicole said. I would say like differences in are things I really focus on the pediatric side. For cystic fibrosis is yes, modulators have done great things for our patients, especially with their nutrition status. And until they're eligible to start, right, Trikafta at the age of 2, or we know how they're going to respond to the modulators. We still want to be, focusing on growth and helping kids reach their growth potential while on modulators. So that's still something I put a lot of focus on being able to help them meet that potential, whether, it's like their height and their BMI, right, until they're able to start those, and kind of supplementing with, higher calorie or higher protein foods as needed until we can, get them on those therapies. And then kind of, talk a little bit with Nicole too. Um, people have been focusing on this high calorie diet, getting calories in however they can on the adult side, right? That's how they were raised. That's how they've always eaten. And now that's kind of changing on the adult side, where, we don't have to put that much focus on. And so at the same time, kind of changing my practice and how we approach just both a positive and food and body relationship for our kids too, of, what does a well-rounded diet look like for patients with CF, and how can we promote that positive body image and relationship with food and their disease. So thank you.
That's wonderful, MJ and Nicole. Before we move on to a different topic, can both of you, either of you, talk a little bit about, what are some issues a person might have that might lead them to meet with you in clinic, or, what symptoms could they be dealing with that might warrant a nutritionist visit, dietitian visit?
Yeah, I can take a jump at that one. So, for our CF patients, we're always seeing them at least annually. And so we always like to check in and on our nutrition things such as enzymes, vitamins, our overall diet, and just growth and weight trajectories to check in with patients. But other things we can be helpful for is, helping with malabsorptive symptoms and enzyme dosing. I feel like we spend a lot of time doing that. Reviewing annual labs, so giving recommendations on vitamin levels, things like that. And then some other things, you definitely would meet with a dietitian on just dietary recommendations. If you had an abnormal or oral glucose tolerance test, and how to help with blood sugar management from that standpoint. Nicole, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think on the adult side, definitely the blood sugar management. Also on the adult side, pregnancy, and supporting, going through that, which again is kind of something that we're seeing more, in the post-Trikafta era, which is pretty amazing. And then, yeah, I think just anything else that, would impact your eating, appetite, just again, talking about those, the diet quality, trying to make changes to your meal patterns. And then also on the adult side too, I'll also mention talking more about mindfulness with eating. So kind of relearning some of those hunger and fullness cues that again we've been taught to kind of override for so long with kind of the diet history. And so that's kind of another focus that we've been starting to talk about more.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think we're going to switch gear a little bit. I do have some questions for our caregivers, and Dean and Jen, as well as Kate. It sounds like, you're parents to thriving young individuals, teenagers. How do you help your children, really manage their CF in the setting of busy high school, busy life, and, what emotional challenges have you personally, as the caregivers, as well as your children, had to cope with over these last few years as CF care is changing?
I think with Ava, it's really not only did she start Trikafta when she was about 10. But with that came puberty and hormones and everything that comes with that. So now all of a sudden she's spent a decade eating a diet we all dream of. And now she has to learn how to eat a normal food pyramid, but also adding in hormones and weight gain. And now she's a teenager who cares about what she looks like. And now we're struggling with not overdoing it, but also trying to eat like a normal person. So it's been a little bit interesting to switch gears entirely because it was always so focused on high fat, high calories, like, and she now can make her own meals. And so she still runs with that plan. And we're trying to, you don't have to eat that way anymore if you don't, you can try not to. And she isn't much of a fruits and vegetables gal. It's more of a cheese and meat kind of thing with her. So we're learning and we'll get there. I'm grateful though that I was always terrified of raising a teenager, forcing treatments, forcing meds. Like the only thing we have to force with her is to remind her she still needs to take her enzymes. Like everything else is gone. And this is the only thing you really have to do. And so I'm just really glad that we don't have to fight like we could be in the rebellious teenage years. So very grateful for that.
I think with I think with Aiden just starting high school, it's been really different for us. Now that you're in high school, you're on your own. You need to have enzymes. They don't have lockers. You got to bring your enzymes with you. So it's that auditing his enzymes sometimes when he's not taking them. And time management is probably the hardest right now, is because now he has his license. You have your license, you get to do what you want. He plays basketball, he plays baseball, so he likes to be busy, obviously then with friends, but then there's the time management on not coming home at 11 o'clock to do your therapy, making sure you're doing your therapy right when you get home from school, or fitting those in. That's our struggle lately, is the time management. And with eating, he's a boy, he's growing, he eats a ton, Chipotle, we just let him eat what he wants now. But it's the whole remembering his enzymes, remembering that you need to do your therapy. It's that stuff.
Well, and really creating the habits and routines, knowing that in 2.5 years he's going to be living independently. And I've heard stories from Dr. Dunnins and others in clinic of what happens sometimes when people go on their own and don't do their best or don't take their enzymes. And so really just trying to condition him while he still is under our eye to drive those routines and understand the importance of them.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that experience. Kelsey, I do have a question for you. It sounds like, you're very, very busy. You mentioned clinical trials. How do you balance your CF care with, all of those other things, employment or hobbies, kind of things like that? How do you approach communicating with all those different needs of your life?
Yeah, not well. No, I'm just kidding. I tell people I'm over caffeinated and under rested most of the time. But I don't recommend it. I have had to learn balance in different seasons of life. I mean, I'm thinking about like when I first moved out, went to college, like that was a different season. Um, Now I'm, in my 30s and have a family. But I have really learned, I think balance comes with boundaries and advocating for yourself. Um, Whether it's in my workplace, my family, my friends, and then also priorities shift. And I've had to really understand where my priorities are. Right now, it's rest. And so I have to really prioritize that so that I can be my best self at work and I can be my best self to my husband. And that's kind of the season I'm in. But yeah, I know that was a long answer for boundaries, priorities, just learning the season that I'm in. Um, and I want to feel good. So I have to kind of schedule things that will happen. And honesty is huge. Be honest with myself and how I'm feeling, honest with my husband, honest with my boss and my work. And I'm grateful that I have a job. I actually just celebrated 10 years at my company last week. So I'm very fortunate that I have a very supportive place of work. So yeah.
Yeah, congratulations on that milestone. And I
Thanks.
definitely understand the caffeination part of that too.
Yeah.
To our caregivers, Kelsey, are there any support groups or support networks that you have relied on over the years that have really helped you? Anything through like the CF Foundation or local resources, anything like that? And
Yeah, so I found a Facebook page pretty early on. I think Facebook was just kind of a new thing when Ava was born. And I found a page that's international. It's called CF Mamas. And it's also, it does have dads too, but it's mainly, I feel like I learned a lot about advocating and also learning the tips and tricks of parenting a CFer that clinic won't necessarily be able to help you with. So in the beginning, we had a very difficult relationship with our dietitian, and it was like they didn't understand what it was like to feed a 2-year-old, a normal 2-year-old, but then nonetheless a 2-year-old with CF. And it was a very big struggle. And some days they eat 4 grapes and some days they eat 7 hot dogs. So it's like there was never like a constant with Ava, and it was really difficult. And then that changed and it made such a world of a difference. And I feel like a lot of the things I learned from the social media page really helped me advocate for Ava and also learn like ways to handle illnesses or how to talk to my family about importance of germs and infection prevention. And because I just had no knowledge, even as a nurse, I didn't learn anything about CF until Ava was born, and there was no family history. So learning so much more outside of the internet with this group of moms was extremely powerful and necessary.
I was just going to say the foundation for us has been fantastic. I've always said it's the family you never wanted, but it's a great family. In meeting all the parents, all family members, relaying, asking questions, because everybody's at a different age for their kids, high school kids to young kids. So when we got involved, the parents that we knew, their kids were always 5-6 years older than Aiden. So it was very helpful to bounce questions off of them. And the CF Foundation or the CF team from Minnesota is fantastic. But the foundation and meeting all the people was our biggest plus.
thank you for that. And I absolutely agree. The foundation's just a really good place to get additional support. I want to make sure that we ask Emily a question. So Emily's been part of our team for at least a year and has really done amazing things supporting our patients. Emily, could you share some insight as to why a person might seek out psychiatry support? What presenting problems do patients bring to an initial appointment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And unfortunately, there isn't a straightforward answer because I think, everyone is dealing, in terms of mental health, right? We all have different struggles. Whether it be depression, like anxiety, sleep problems, I pretty much treat a lot of different things. And so even if someone's, you know, kind of questioning, like, you know, is there a mental health component here? Am I struggling in a certain area of my life? I think it's always a nice conversation to have in terms of, you know, when I meet with patients, I go through, you know, a pretty thorough interview. And so it can help, you know, kind of either validate the concerns that they had, or maybe we find together that there's something different going on. So I think, you know, for a variety of reasons, it can be helpful to meet with a mental health provider.
Can I piggyback off of Emily? Is that allowed? Yeah.
Absolutely, Kelsey, yes.
Okay. When we were talking about like support, this like just happened to that Emily goes first and now I'm talking, but I kind of thought of when I was younger as like it was like forced therapy. My parents were really into like seeing somebody and talking things out, and growing up I was like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. I live this every day. Um, However, mental health is so huge, and I'm so grateful that I had that foundation and I saw someone through the U growing up. And now I see a therapist weekly, actually, just with the stage of life I'm in. And, you know, a lot of my peers are having kids. And so, like, now I'm navigating just like a different layer of that. But I actually found seeing a mental health specialist through like my younger years really important when it came to comparing myself to other people, even with CF, where it's like it's so easy to like compare yourself, and it can be really hard. And then when I wasn't eligible for Trikafta, I started seeing somebody, a mental health specialist, because I was like, wait, like I feel like I'm being left out. And that's not the case at all. But like, you know, that comparison of like, oh, okay, like this, I want to talk to someone about this. And I'm just being like super raw and honest here. I hope that's okay. But there's just so many seasons of our lives, and then you add this other layer that, I mean, my mental health specialist through the years, I for sure believe saved my life in more ways than one. And my marriage, in different seasons of not feeling like a good enough wife because I'm sick a lot, or like I just can't be you know, what I thought a wife should be, or a spouse or a partner. And so just all these layers. And so I'm grateful that mental health is just part of the overall whole body well-being. So I
Yeah, thanks for
advocate.
sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think you bring up so many points where I could like run with. But I do, you know, I think in my practice, I think, you know, it's really important to look at everyone holistically, and life changes and you know, health concerns and chronic health issues, I think can absolutely contribute to mental health concerns. And so I think it's, you know, all of the things you just listed, changes in life, transitions in life, that can absolutely bring up things. And so usually in my practice, I always recommend, and pretty frequently, I will say, recommend therapy as well. And so like, we know that a combination of medication and therapy can really provides the best outcomes, I think, for people. So that's what I try to do in my practice, is really meet people where they're at, understand, you know, what is your daily life? What are your CF cares? What does that look like for you? Because that's different for everyone. And it's really important to have an understanding of, you know, like what everyone individually is going through.
I think that's fantastic. You know, I just think this is an excellent platform to talk about some of the misconceptions of seeking out mental health support too. There are probably a number of people who may have never done that before. But Emily, just to kind of piggyback off of that a little bit more, are there any common misconceptions about somebody coming to see you, or their expectations of what you might recommend versus what they might tolerate, whether it be medication or therapies?
Yeah, that's a few different questions. I'm going to try to answer both of them. Um, I'm always happy to talk to people if they don't know if they want to start medications, or if they don't know how medications could fit, or, it's just so many things, right? The decision to take a mental health medication is a big one. And so it's really meeting people where they're at. I think that's a big part of my job is to understand what they want and understand where their goals lie. So if someone comes to see me and they're like, after a discussion, they're like, I'm really not ready to start a medication right now, then that's okay. Then we'll talk about other avenues to go down. So that's a kind of the whole medication piece. Some of the misconceptions, I'm trying to think back. I think the probably the biggest one in terms of mental health is that we've come a long way. There is still some stigma, I think, associated with mental health. And what Kelsey mentioned is that mental health is health. And so I don't know where along the way we came about thinking of mental health a little bit differently than our physical health. I think that's probably one of the most common misconceptions. I've also had a lot of patients, tell me that they don't feel like they want to depend on a medication to feel better. And I always say, we all have different, seasons and changes in our life. And sometimes we just need a little more support, and looking at it as, you're advocating for your health versus, you're dependent on a medication. So I think that's one of the misconceptions around medications and mental health is that, something's wrong with you if you need to see someone for your mental health. And that's absolutely not the case. And I think we still have a little bit of a ways to go in terms of kind of counteracting that thought.
Wonderful. Well, we have really a little bit of time here and an exceptional panel. I think there's a lot that we can learn from each of you, but I do want to open it up to the audience to see if there are any audience questions. And I'm not sure if people can unmute themselves or if they would just have to type in the chat.
If people want to ask any questions in the chat, we can review them and hopefully find some answers.
Okay, I do see a question here asking, I think this one is probably to Emily and maybe also Dr. Keel. Can you talk about how CF meds affect mental health? And I know we did do a journal club on a review article about just this.
We did. And also this is a good question. I always ask people about their CF medications, and, I like to understand whether or not, if they're coming to me and they have a concern, anxiety, depression, insomnia, panic attacks, it's, when did they start? When did those symptoms start? And yes, there's absolute research that has shown a correlation between, starting a medication like Trikafta, I think is the one that we really focused in on, and having some, maybe some anxiety or mood symptoms after starting it. I think that's really individualized though. And I think it's really important to, kind of keep, I always recommend, close monitoring. So like if you are starting a modulator or Trikafta, really kind of keeping tabs on your mental health, like your mental health vital signs, right? Like, how am I sleeping? How am I doing in terms of functioning, going to work, coping with stressors? I think that's a huge one too. So this is a really important topic. And like I said, we do know there's some evidence, that has maybe shown a correlation. So it's always something I like to ask about, and I think always important to talk with, your CF provider as well about.
And Emily, I'll just piggyback off that too, is I think that there's pretty good evidence too that when you take a modulator, it can actually affect or be affected by other medications that you're taking. And so the way that your body metabolizes it can change. So the way your body metabolizes your antidepressant can change. So it may not be that your antidepressant isn't effective anymore, it just may be at the dose that it is, it's not as effective. And so you can see those mental health changes too. And I think that there's also a fairly complex relationship where sometimes you start to feel better, but then there's a little bit, like with the Trikafta start, I've had patients who clinically feel better, but then mental health changes, or they feel like a little bit more lost because the way that they were planning their life out before Trikafta changes, and how they look at the future. And I think that can actually bring some mental distress as well. And so I think there's a lot of really complex ways that mental health and modulators can interact besides just the straight up pharmacogenomics, or not genomics, but the pharmacokinetics between the interactions of medications.
Absolutely. And it's really hard to, understand what's contributing to what we're seeing. And, like Sarah just shared it, it's very complex. And so, changes in life outcomes goals that can also impact things as well when someone's starting to feel better physically. So, yeah.
Okay, are there any other questions? We still have about 3 minutes. Okay. Well, if not, I think we can maybe wrap up a couple minutes early. I know it's late at night. I do want to take this time to thank everybody for being part of our virtual CF Education Day. I know it's hard to get together in the evening, especially, but I really appreciate everybody who is involved in planning this, all of our panelists, Darla, Martha, um, everybody who is here this evening. I do want to share the screen here. We have a flip book that everybody will have access to. Can you see this?
Hey, Kathy, I think there's like one more question. I don't know if you want to
Oh, is
take
there?
the time for it.
Let's see. I'm going to stop sharing here. Okay. Oh, here we go. Excellent. Just in the nick of time. Thanks, Sarah. So I do see a question. Are you seeing many eating disorders since modulators began?
Yeah, I can take a swing at this one. I will say that, disordered eating has been an issue in CF for a while, not necessarily just since like the modulators. But I think that there's definitely a lot more awareness around it. And again, as MJ mentioned, how body image, we're starting to address that a little bit more now. And as these nutrition needs are changing, or as people are maybe seeing more significant changes in their weight and kind of over a quicker amount of time, I think it is definitely something that, again, we're just aware of and screening for, collaborating with our social workers, just so that we are addressing it if it is becoming an issue.
Excellent, Nicole. Thank you. All right. Well, we're right on time. This is perfect. We're getting a lot of thank yous in the commentary here. I'm not sure who else can see this, but I will just share my screen briefly. There is an excellent flip book put together by Ashley Fuchs as well as Anderson. And just to go through this, I'm not sure if it'll work, but it does feature a really talented artist, Medora Frey, who is also an amazing person. Check out her artwork. Other things that are in the flip book is some information about the lectureship speaker, as well as some helpful clinic numbers and tips about both the adult and the pediatric clinics, some pharmacy guidelines, terminology, gene therapy, really, which is an exciting part of research right now in the CF community, some excellent recipes that look quite tasty, and some fun pictures of your CF care team in the back. So check that out on your own time. We do have 3 gift cards that we will be doing a drawing for. If you are one of the lucky 3, then Em will reach out to you via email. So I do want to say thanks again for everybody being here, and I hope you all stay warm. Okay.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.